today I'm going to speak about the struggles in Poplar, which occurred in the 1920s, 90 years ago. It's something that comes up today, something that's proud amongst working class history, and it's important that the lessons from Poplar are taken up, not only taken up, but implemented, because what we've seen over the last couple of years is Labour councillors, Labour politicians invoke popularism, speaking about Poplar Council and sort of going against the history and what the Poplar Council actually did in the 1920s. First off, to give just a bit of introduction to the situation at this university. This university, just like I think Antonio will speak about this next, it isn't broke, it's not skint, it's got £10 million in reserves. Right, Wayne?
Yes, I know.
It's not skint. But,
well, not under this government.
However, this university is making over 100 redundancies in a period where it's got £10 million in reserves. So we've put the question to the fact that there's no cuts needed at this university, that should be no redundancies, and that we should fight for all jobs and services and working condition. And that was a line taken up by George Lansbury and the Poplar councillors, and they built a campaign to gain mass support and won concessions against the government. So I'm going to speak a bit about that situation in that time. In 1921, that's where 30 Labour councillors went to jail. And it's interesting looking at the makeup of those councillors. They weren't the career politicians of today. Of the councillors of that particular Labour group, 7 were dock workers, 7 were railway men, 4 were Labour. This was a time when Labour had a working class base and had links to the working class. That was below its capitalist head, and the working class had a means and the democratic structures which to influence and gain concession from its top. So just to sort of speak about Poplar, it was a poor area dominated in particular by the docking industry. In that moment of time, Britain was going through a post-First World War boom. However, as always with capitalism, boom soon turned into bust. And soon the central government, the Tory government, would impose swinging cuts to local councils. So the Poplar councillors were faced with a choice, either to cut the workers who had voted them in, or to stand up and defend their rights. And so what they did, the councillors, was they looked at how they charged their constituents who had voted them in. And it turns out the way that rates was administered in Britain at that time, each council would have to pay its own poor relief. So you had the situation where boroughs like Poplar would in fact have to pay more money out to its local constituents than a borough like Westminster, which is a lot more affluent and didn't have as much members who needed that poor relief. It's an inherently unfair situation. So the Poplar councillors convened a meeting with the local trade unions and decided to put the proposal to central government that we will not increase the rates. In fact, we refuse to increase the rates. This situation caused mass anger from the Tory government of that time. And so it turned out the action from the Tory government at that time was to issue court orders to those Labour councillors and demand that they go to jail. However, taking up this position and this stance gained mass support from workers who understood they had representatives who stood up for their class rather than knifing them in the back that we have today. So what we had was thousands upon thousands march from the Poplar councillors on towards the High Court, and true to their words, George Lansbury stood up and said, if we must choose between contempt of the law, contempt of the court, or contempt for the poor, we'll pick contempt for the court. And so they went and were jailed in Brixton and Holloway prisons. And like I said, this gained mass support, and thousands marched to the prison and demanded that these workers be released. In fact, when the women councillors were in prison, 10,000 marched with those women councillors, some of them whom were pregnant, and demanded their release. Under this mass pressure, what was the reaction of the Parliamentary Labour Party, the leadership? They were disgusted by the position of those Labour councillors, similar to the position taken up by the Liverpool councillors in the 80s. However, due to the mass support, a meeting was forced with the Poplar councillors who were jailed with the Labour Party group, and through negotiations, and caused by the mass pressure, the position was taken up, which forced the government to back down, and in fact a concession of 1 million was gained from central government. It's again an example of using mass campaigns, mobilising the working class to gain concessions. However, this was not the end. After that, the Poplar councils demanded that the rates be pulled, so councils with a high proportion of poor workers would not have to pay the same amount as Westminster. So what you had was, in fact, it was pulled, and again the Poplar councils won concessions of government because they had mass support. After that, they demanded that council workers be paid more money, and they won that too. So this showed that pro-working class policies gained an echo and gained support, and this was proven a couple of years later. The Poplar councillors won an increased majority in the Labour Council. In fact, Herbert Morrison, who was against the Poplar councillors' position, he was actually voted off and had the council with example, which is an example to Labour councillors that if you decide to unite the working class, they'll make you pay when it comes to the ballot box. And so we turn to today, and this is where I'll wrap up. We turn to the lessons of today, and what do we have? This year, Tower Hamlets was faced with mass cuts imposed from central government, and every single Labour councillor voted through the cuts, totaling 73 million over 3 years. The area with the highest level of poverty, each councillor refused to stand up for its worker, which shows what an absolute disgrace the Labour Party has become, and why our party, Socialist Party, was correct in leaving that party, recognising that it was an outright capitalist party. But not only does this lesson need to be heeded by Labour politicians, also needs to be heeded by those who run public services, those who run the hospitals, those who run university. My message to our Vice-Chancellor would be, who's faced with a shortfall in funding caused by government, is to use your mass reserves, use that to build a trench, and for him to stand with us and not against us. However, he refused to do so. We've called a meeting on Wednesday demanding the setting of needs budgets, and the Director of HR emailed me back today saying that he was saddened by my controversial, confrontational stance, or daring to call an indicative strike ballot when there's 100 redundancies that he's pushing through, which sort of shows what sort of world he lives on. So this is the position that we say. We say follow the leadership of the Poplar councillors, use it today, because following working class policies, it gains mass support, and it's something that should be invoked not only by working class representatives on political level, but also those who work in the workplace. Thank you.